You know the side camera has stopped 3 times, by the way.
Oh yeah, I was hearing. Were you hearing that?
Yeah, why did it stop?
Why has it stopped? The temperature. Oh, it overheated.
Okay, that makes life
Ooh,
easier.
the conversation's too hot.
That's
You laugh at that? Come on, that was a rubbish joke,
very
man.
good. That's why I laughed.
Bloody hell.
You should tell
The only joke I've laughed at in the whole day.
That's not even funny. Now I get one clap. I get a slow clap now. Assalamu alaikum, legends. We've got a very good podcast for you today, mashallah. A lot of people have been asking about Islam 360's position on the vaccines and what's going on. Are we going to be forced to do all of this, put all these injections into our bodies and all that kind of stuff? So we've got a very important podcast to you on the vaccine issue today. Before we jump into it, just a quick reminder, please do consider subscribing. I notice in the statistics a lot of people are watching on YouTube, for example. They're watching but they're not subscribed. So subscribe, hit the bell notification there on the screen right now, and you'll be at the front of the queue to get all of the good stuff whenever we release it. And also finally, please do consider donating to sound22.com/donate. Please do try and help this podcast continue going and all of Sound 22's excellent projects. Let's try and get 250 people, giving £5 a month. It's only, I think, 16 pence or something a day. You can do it. I believe in you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Unscripted podcast by Psalm 21C. We've got a special one in store for you today. We have all the way from sunny Manchester, even though it's at night, Sh Abu Eesa Niamatullah. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing, Sheikh?
Alhamdulillah. I wish it was
This
funny.
is where we do the fake salam, like we haven't been testing the mic for the last 30 minutes.
For the last 3 hours.
Yeah. So you're a clinical pharmacist by profession. You have a few fingers in the old big pharma industry pies.
I wish you up.
So what we want to talk about, I mean, a lot of people have been, as I mentioned on the phone the other day, a lot of people have been contacting us saying, what's Islam 360 saying about the new COVID vaccine, all that kind of stuff. And as you can imagine, you've been on the kind of cyberspace train with all the plethora of reactions that we're getting from not just the not just the vaccine, but the whole pandemic itself. So yeah, we thought let's get someone who's spoken about this, someone who has some skin in the game, someone who has some experience in this. We couldn't find them, so we thought let's just set off Abu Eesa.
Haha, nice. I was waiting where that was going to end. But let me come right back at you. I thought you said they wanted to know what Islam 21C had to say. Obviously not very much.
So, I mean, what I've been saying is just kind of shooting from the hip, saying just do what Bima says, And I was looking at Bima's kind of, we've been supporting
Remind
them,
me,
trying to signal
Bima is
boost
the
them.
British
Islamical Medical Association.
Oh, yeah, the Muslim body of
I
doctors,
think.
yeah.
Something like that. I might have replaced a few letters there. But their advice is similar to what you came public with a few days ago, which is you advise people who are vulnerable, who are being offered the vaccine, to take it. It's
the
recommended.
current one, let's just be accurate.
The current one,
which has been
Pfizer,
released by Pfizer,
BioNTech.
Because we haven't been able
one
to analyze the excipients fully. Moderna has not released its full ingredients list. AstraZeneca certainly hasn't, and then Johnson & Johnson and the others, we're still a while off. So yeah, only the Pfizer BioNTech one at the moment.
Yeah, I know what all those names mean. Let me ask you this. So I put some questions out just to general friends and people on social media and stuff, saying, what are the kind of top issues that people have with this vaccine that are maybe causing some hesitation. And a common theme is we're being treated like guinea pigs. This has been sped up, this process. Normally it takes years, but they've done it in a few months and all the rest of it. What do you say about that?
Well, there's no doubt about it being sped up. There's no doubt. See, the problem is that there are a lot of true points to be made. There are a lot of issues to be raised, genuine concerns, and that will always be the case with medicines and vaccinations. They've had a checkered history. I mean, we can wax lyrical about all of the the results, the successes, getting rid of smallpox, getting rid of X, measles, mumps, and whatever. But it has been a process. They're a lot better than what they used to be. There's been a lot of feedback as well. There's been a lot of money that's been paid out, for example, when it goes wrong, and it does go wrong. And because we're talking about health, something which people take very, very seriously, and rightly so, you always want to make sure that the testing procedure and the testing period is as rigorous and as long as possible. Clearly, this one hasn't been in line with the previous ones. The real question is that should that in of itself be a problem? Like if I say to you, for example, that this one only took a year to produce, whereas normally
It's kind of arbitrary.
yeah, whereas normally it would take 10 years. Well, okay, that might make sense if you are starting from the very beginning with absolutely no funding, with absolutely no background, with absolutely no people ready to jump into action that have had no experience with with vaccines and infections, with no interest from the public, with no interest at the state level. Then you know what? If someone produced me a vaccine in a year's time, I'd be very, very suspicious. But if we've been doing vaccines now professionally at the global level for 40, 50 years, if we have looked at the coronavirus itself, or we call it the coronavirus, but don't forget, that's not actually its name. It's SARS-CoV or CoV-2. It's a form of coronavirus, but it's because it's the most dominant one, the most scariest one, the most epic one on a pandemic level. It's the one which people have now applied the name to, coronavirus. It's a form of a coronavirus. It belongs to the family of coronavirus. Has been here for ages. We've got like 16, 17 years of experience with coronaviruses. Not just the viruses, but vaccines against them. So SARS, for example, us Muslims know very much about MERS, the Middle Eastern version of that coronavirus. So people forget that we've been making vaccines against this form of virus already for many years of safety data as well. Some of the different technologies have been in existence, like live viruses, attenuated viruses, for example, inactivated. That technology has been here for decades. As for mRNA, the thing which people are so worried about, whether it's the Pfizer or the Moderna vaccine, mRNA technology has been in play for 6-7 years, not just in vaccines, but in medication as well. We take it for medicines for macular degeneration when your retina gets too much blood to it, messes it all up. We use mRNA-based medication for that, for amyloidosis, for example, for muscular dystrophy, for example. So, some of these techniques have been well available. Throw into that the public absolutely in pieces, industry in pieces, finances in pieces, the government political crisis beyond their wildest imagination. Trump about to win a landslide. Literally, coronavirus has destroyed him. Its political power has been unprecedented. So governments were throwing not millions or hundreds of millions, they threw billions at this project. And once you've been given money and you take red tape away and you take the regulatory agencies and you don't say to them normally like, don't treat the drug companies who are out for profits with disdain, but work with them at every stage because we really now support them. We're your best friends. And you start offering grants to all of the different companies to make sure that you are involved and informed and can act quickly. It's a whole different ballgame. So it's not surprising that the whole thing has been reduced so much. There's a friend of mine, for example, that was doing, applied for the license or the permission to do a study. Normally that would take years to receive that. He got it in a couple of months, for example, in order to do testing. So everything has been expedited, accelerated. We have greater technology. We have greater knowledge as well, money, resources. However, the one thing that we don't have, and that's the big question, is the follow-up data. So to actually get to the development of the vaccine wasn't very difficult. They had that within a couple of months, actually, right? What's taken the majority of the year has been the actual testing period, and then enough of a follow-up period after, once we got the results, positive results, by the way. Remember these figures of 90, 95%, it's working, efficacy, blah, blah, blah. That's been around for months. That was not enough for us to be able to license the vaccine and spread it. We need to see after a month. The key is a month, because normally you don't get serious reactions after a month. They went with a couple of months, and after a couple of months they've basically gone to the regulatory agencies. They've said, you know what, we're pretty confident, we've seen enough, we've not had enough serious adverse reactions or events, and we're of course going to have to monitor that. Ideally we'd like to be able to spend another 1 or 2 years studying the people who've had the vaccine and see what happens, ideally. However, the need is an absolute emergency. We've got millions, 1.7 million dead, 4,000 people dying every day. Healthcare systems in complete tatters. People's finances, everybody doesn't need a reminding about how controversial that is. The shops, the businesses, absolutely up the creek, you know. So, yeah, it's been accelerated, and I don't have a problem with that. The issue that is of concern is the follow-up data. But in practice, let me just say this to you. I thought this was meant to be a podcast, not another lecture, but what you need to know is that normally after a month, you're normally seeing bad reactions. If there's a problem, you'll see it. So once you've
After
gone
a month or within a month?
Huh?
Do you mean within a month or after a month?
Meaning that within a month, you normally have a good idea of what's going on. I mean, this would be after the second dose in a booster scenario, after a single dose in a single scenario. You're normally a single dose vaccine. So you're normally seeing the kind of reactions happen pretty quick.
Well, what's the worst that can happen? I mean, people are. I mean, I've been sent so many crazy things about DNA's in it, and I'm like, bro, you just ate a flipping steak with a bunch of beef DNA in it.
So the DNA,
don't care about that.
The DNA part, I don't. The people who bring up the point of it's manipulating our DNA, it's editing our DNA, it's going to make us grow horns and grow facial hair out of nose and ears like yourself, that kind of thing. That is not something which is a side effect issue. When they're talking about side effect, they're talking about brain damage, autism, they're talking about mercury poisoning, they're talking about long-term development disorders or other disabilities, death, huge anaphylactic reactions.
So that what some people are saying is that can still happen then, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely that could possibly happen. Here, let's look at the stats though. Those type of reactions, based upon our historical analysis of follow-up data to vaccines, indicate that if a vaccine has gone through its trials, clinical trials, the normal 3 and sometimes 4 phases, and it's been given the pass and the go-ahead at each stage, meaning they've weeded out the problematic ones. Like, for example, there's there's like 90 on the go at the moment, but there was a couple of hundred on the go, and a couple of hundred have had
different
to be cancelled.
vaccines.
Yeah, a couple of hundred vaccines attempts have had to be curtailed. The one last week in Australia, I can't remember the company. Huge investment went into that one. Melbourne University, I think, based. I could have got that wrong, but I mean the point is that they saw enough to see problems and low efficacy. So there are hundreds that haven't made it, that didn't pass that profile. Once it gets to the end and you're seeing stability, efficacy, working, low side effects, once it's got to that stage, and then after a month or 2 months afterwards, you've not got any serious side effects, they estimate from previous vaccines that there's a 1 in million chance of a serious side effect. 1 in million. We're talking a death, a major anaphylactic reaction. I'm talking long term, I mean, because normally when you get an anaphylactic reaction, a massive allergic reaction, you're normally going to get that there and then, quickly, in that first week, in the first 2 weeks. So these other long-term things are very, very rare. So, and listen, if you start getting into that game, if we're going to, talk to Muslims or anybody who's concerned about risk and things, then you need to know that going out, this is not made up by me. This is factual. There's a 1 in 100 chance of you getting killed in a car crash. There's a 1 in 550 or 556 chance of you being killed whilst walking on the street. That's either via car hitting you or something else. There's a 1 in 100 chance, for example, of you, 1 in 114 chance of you dying from a fall. So you are 10,000 times more likely to walk outside of your house and fall over and die than you are to have a serious reaction to a vaccine. Does that mean you won't have one? No. It means that 1 per 1 million.
It's all about probabilities.
It is all about probabilities. Yeah. Nobody, no scholar, no expert, no immunologist, no doctor should ever be telling a patient that there's no such thing as side effects. There always are.
The problem is that, and I mentioned this to medics and kind of researchers in the past, that you guys are too sometimes too academic and sometimes too careful with your language, whereas the complete jahil people, they speak in 100% certainty. and they say ridiculous kind of things like, I won't say, I won't make an example, I might offend Mahmoud or something, but they mention, these big statements as though they're facts, like grow horns or whatever. But the scientists would be like, well, actually, the chance of that happening is like 7
As
billion
opposed
to
to
1 or
completely
whatever.
dismissing it.
Yeah.
Well, you know what it is? The problem is, that's a really good point. Yeah, if we were to listen to every Tom, Dick and Junaid, that's coming out with all the rubbish that they are, then we'd be in a mess. And we're being too polite. We're in a position, I mean, I wish I was too polite, and I have to say I struggle immensely with these kind of every Junaid and Bushra who's coming out and saying that you're about to die, whatever, whatnot, and you've got all of these great now responses, which and honestly, the only response is to mock. And I know that's not Islamic and it's not right, but it's right to say if you drink Ruh Hafza, don't ask what's in the vaccine. If you drink Diet Coke, don't ask what's in the vaccine. If you use the masjid wudu slippers, don't ask what's in the vaccine. I'm telling you, these are absolutely spot on. That's the way you respond to people who operate at that level. As for those folks who want to speak about this properly and professionally and academically with stats and figures, then we need a different approach. We need to acknowledge.
All right, here's some figures. Here's some figures.
Go on.
Yeah, you mentioned. We're talking about the Pfizer/BioNTech thing here, and I was having a read of the BEMA advice, and they gave some stats about it. You're right in terms of, you mentioned it's been sped up, but they mentioned that one of the reasons it's sped up is because things that happened in series before are now happening in parallel.
That's right.
So that's it doesn't mean less research and less scrutiny is necessarily being done. Still the same normal phases, phase 1, 2, 3, but they said something like 2,000 person years. Which sounds like a lot. I don't know what to compare that to. 2,000 person years have been involved in this study. They said 42,000 people were used in the trials. Half of them were the placebo group, the control group. Half of them were the vaccine group, and that's where this 95% efficacy stat comes from. So the control group, 162 people got it, and the vaccinated group, 8 people got it. So all of these big numbers, they boil down to just 162 people got it versus 8. When you're looking at now this handful of people compared to 42,000, isn't it safer just to not just to carry on and out of 21,000 people who got the placebo, only 162 of them ended up getting the symptoms of COVID in the first place. So is this...
Yeah, so what you're saying is that is it even that serious a condition with its own inherent risk that we're now taking a additional risk with the vaccine? I mean, it's actually interesting, especially from an Islamic finance point of view or muamalat point of view, on the issue of what we call, when you're discussing the issue of gambling, the introduction of a new risk into a set scenario increases the problematic nature of the mas'ala. So as you said, you've already got a certain risk. To minimize the risk, you wouldn't enter into a new event with a new risk, i.e. the vaccine. The truth is that the problem of coronavirus of COVID-19 cannot be based upon, or the impact of COVID-19 cannot be based just upon the low mortality rate of its people, of its victims. There's a multi-dimensional kind of approach that's required to understand what the issues are. So for example, people look at the mortality, it's natural. We always go to the most dramatic. So we want to see how many people die of this versus how many people die of that.
Yeah.
But if you've had corona and you've got long COVID at the moment, and you are suffering now 6 months down, the fatigue, and we know people. Everybody obviously now knows someone who's had coronavirus or COVID-19. And we're probably getting close soon to everybody now knowing someone who's now got COVID-19 long, meaning that they're suffering from this just incessant fatigue, constant joint ache, body ache. They've been able to now specify it now quite specifically. The cough and respiratory systems are kind of like lingering about, but it's the fatigue. Absolutely knackered all the time. That has a health cost. That has an industry cost. but even this is not the primary point. The primary point is the healthcare system. The healthcare system still has to look after and invest all of its time and resources in this one event or one cause, which has left the rest of our healthcare in complete chaos. Now, I am the first to admit, and I explained this in my detailed lecture on this issue, that if you belong in a country or a culture that is not dependent upon first world healthcare systems and always insisting to be admitted to hospital and receiving top care, then you know what? Like in my village in the northwest frontier of Pakistan, when I'm chatting to my family, they're saying, "What corona? What are you talking about, corona?" And
Yeah.
but then at the same time, if they have a heart attack, no one's taking them to hospital either. If they're having a stroke, no one's taking them to hospital either. If someone's got diabetes or someone's got X, Y, Z, the hospitals are miles away. Some guy is going to come and he's going to put a drip on for him. Yeah, get a drip. Yeah. I'll add another one to your jokes. If you're a pack and you're taking any kind of medicine in Pakistan, don't ask what's in the vaccine. If you're connected to a drip from the guy who is the doctor, who's actually the sweet shop seller,
The drip probably says Pfizer on it.
who's got a supply of antibiotics and injections and just goes around and just gives injections to people, right? Don't ask what's in the vaccine. So, if you're not dependent upon the healthcare system and people are just dying of a coughing fit and lack of oxygen, well, according to them, you're dying of a coughing fit and a lack of oxygen. And that's the end of it. So different cultures are going to react to the emergency nature of this. Obviously, us in the West, it's paralyzed us because we're utterly weak, pathetic, dependent upon the healthcare system, so incessantly obsessed with always trying to cure something, never trying to tough it out, not always taking medication, can't deal with pain, hypochondriac just to the max. That's our nature. And that's why, again, in my lecture, I've said that at the individual Islamic level, it's not obligatory. And I'll even go and say, on an individual level, when there's a choice, I don't even think it's recommended to take the vaccine, because I don't certainly hold that position.
What do you think so far? Agree? Disagree? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to head over to donate.islam21ce.com to help fund this podcast. Yeah, I heard you. Your lecture, part of the lecture where you said that. I wanted to ask you a few questions about that, but in a minute, inshallah. But just on the stats perspective, right? One of the questions that has come in, and it's a good question. It's okay if you're saying 95% efficacy, 5% of the people got it. The question is the demographics of that 5% haven't been published. Is this correct? What if
it hasn't?
What if all of the
what
if it's all Paks and Muslims, whatever, and we're just wandering into this?
So let me tell you what kind of stuff I get up to. All right, I sat in a stream, meaning I watched the stream of the expert advisory body to the FDA on vaccines and biological substances. It was an 8-hour session, okay, and they passed the Moderna vaccine, 20 in favor, 0 against, 1 abstention. And the reason I'm going to talk about this is because just to make people realize that they're obsessed with conspiracy theories, right? That there's some kind of massive, FDA is against them, the experts are all working together, blah, blah, blah. These are the people who speak, who are not involved in the field, who don't understand what academics are. Academics, if anything, are completely obnoxious, sticking to their own opinion, not caring about other people. They will speak the truth. They will make sure they blow their own trumpet. They will want to make sure they put their opinion across, differing with each other, ideas, whatever, whatnot. So the idea that the entire scientific community is in on some kind of conspiracy is crazy. And if you actually put some effort in and understand how regulatory bodies like the FDA or the MHRA in England make these decisions, they obviously are being told by the government to get a job done, but they're independent. They are experts and we respect that. But they themselves have to take advice from outside bodies, non-government linked, who are also independent. And they will bring up these points that we all have. So the questions that you're receiving, for example, or they're not just concerns that you've received. I have those concerns. They really messed up by not increasing BAME, black and ethnic, minority ethnic populations, who are clearly more predisposed to COVID-19 for whatever the reasons are. We haven't been able to work out just yet. But therefore there should have been an increased percentage of those folks in the studies. There weren't. That's a problem. Another issue, the concept of the double-blind, random double-blind study in terms of making sure that something works. First of all, a lot of people have been throwing that out. How do you know that vaccine testing is not against placebo? When you read statements, from these folks who have no idea what they're talking about, it's incredibly irritating. First of all, that's just not true. For example, Pfizer and Moderna, huge studies, 33,000, 40,000 people in a study is roughly the same that you would have for a normal pediatric vaccine of any other sort. That's a huge study. That's not small by any by any means. So there's no, these are not secondhand, China versions, right? These are proper, bona fide, legit, high quality, good analysis, and they went in with placebos. And they went double blind, meaning that the people do not know. So whoever's getting the vaccine doesn't know it's the vaccine, and the people who are getting the placebo don't know, which is of course the gold standard. But by the way, it's not the only standard though. A lot of people make it. You hear the word gold standard. It is the gold standard, but that doesn't mean that other studies don't give good results or correct results. That's got to be said. But yes, we want the gold standard placebo study. The problem that we've got is that we are current, and a lot of people didn't see this. And you know who brought it up? Not Tom, Dick and Bushra and Tom, Dick and Junaid, right? It's not them who found this out. It's the FDA advisors, the scientists, the virologists, the immunologists, the doctors themselves have questioned Moderna and brought them to task and said, how are we going to deal with this problem? And it's called unblinding and crossing over from a double-blind placebo study. And I don't want to bore everybody and lose everyone, but I just want you to understand. Normally, when you're trying to find a vaccine for a very serious condition, normally, you're not doing it in the middle of a pandemic. You've got a problem. You've identified it. It's spreading in a certain area. It's well controlled, but it's very serious. So then you apply for license, funding. Everybody likes the idea. They invest all the money. You hope to get it right. You put it then through trials, all the rest of it. The difference this time is that the whole world is in the greatest emergency that is probably ever seen. And the pressure upon everybody to ramp it up is crazy. On the plus point, it means that you don't need to find some random kind of group of people across the world to test in. You've got thousands of test subjects that are getting infected all the time. So you can very quickly save so much time to see the efficacy of your vaccine because so many people are getting infected. This is another reason why it became so quick to be able to work out the results.
Yeah.
The problem is, and think about this, if you have received the placebo and you don't know, of course you don't know, it's double blind, you don't know, and now you've finished from your study, and now you know that the vaccine itself has already been authorized via emergency authorization, already allowed, or there's another rival vaccine that has been allowed or authorized. So for example, if we look at Moderna, we've got some people who are still not sure in the trial whether they received the vaccine or they didn't. And yet Pfizer has proved it's worked, already been spread all over the world, already been used, already working. Now, don't you think that I have a right as a volunteer who went and gave up my thing and went to Moderna, I'll do this, and now I need to know, by the way, did I actually receive the vaccine or not? Because I could get really ill and I want to take the vaccine. So I want to know whether I got the placebo or the vaccine, and if I didn't, I want to take the vaccine. Now, it is utterly unethical to keep that person in the dark. We've got to protect them. They've got to have the opportunity to either be told, yeah, you received it, so don't worry, and we're already going with it, or you haven't got it, and okay, take it. And I'll tell you another one. What about those people who don't even ask that question, but they're in the study, but they're health workers, or they are extremely vulnerable, so they are in a certain tier where they're offered by the government a vaccine. So they've taken a placebo, and they've taken the vaccine when it becomes available, and you, remember, in a study are looking at the follow-up data. You're making sure that you're monitoring them for years afterwards. That's all set up. How can you now rely on this data when the person's actually received the vaccine from the government or from another supplier? That data now becomes unreliable. So listen, nobody, especially us who are someone like myself, obviously I have a public profile. I'm not going to risk my reputation on some vaccine and some big pharma bakwasi. And I've got my own integrity. I'm not going to go and swear by them. I know its plus points. I know its weak points. I know its issues, and that is a problem. Is it a major problem? No, I know it's not a major problem because we've already got the results sufficient enough before we can now allow these people to take the vaccine themselves if they want to. So I'm actually okay them unblinding. And I know there is an ethical debate whether you should, whether you shouldn't. So I'm okay. But on that advisory panel, there was one expert, a chief virologist, immunologist. He's a microbiologist as well. His name's Michael Kurilla. He abstained, right? So he was the abstaining vote. So 24, 0 against, and 1 abstaining. That now means the FDA has now got the green light, and that's why it's now authorized Moderna. We still haven't done that in the UK. Now, what was his problem? He said that I don't think that the benefits outweigh the risks in the FDA giving this license, this drug, this vaccine, sorry, the Moderna vaccine, the license to be used in over 18s. Now, that's very interesting. Like I said,
Why is that?
the public are not going to be able to pick up on that, or maybe some will, but the experts, they know what their responsibility is. They've got to be academically honest. And when you think about it, there's an argument. It's what you started off at the beginning with. You said that if I'm young and I'm healthy and I'm 20 years old, the likelihood of me getting it is maybe high, but being affected by it is incredibly low. Being seriously affected by it is very, very low. And death is like in the 0.0s, right? So if you have that level of risk against the virus, can I now with good conscience say that unrestricted, this in an 18-year-old and a 22-year-old is without doubt the better action for you to take the vaccine, even though we don't know its long-term risk profile? And he said, I can't in good conscience say that. Can I say it for the 30-year plus, 50 plus, the 70 plus, the extreme vulnerable? Absolutely. He's behind the vaccine. He wants the vaccine to be given, but he doesn't want to agree to the statement or the license, because the license is restricted to what it says. He doesn't want to say, yeah, I will accept that, or I will promote this in over 18. So my point, Salman, is that there are concerns, valid concerns, but we shouldn't, just because there's some controversy or some concerns, lose sight of the wood for the trees. This is a safe vaccine, or certainly the ones in front of us at the moment, that should be taken by the clinically vulnerable, and the rest of the folks who are not in that scenario, then they should look to the maslaha, the benefit for themselves, for the people around them. And if it becomes a request from the government that we now are asking everybody to take it because the herd immunity level is too low and we need to do it, and not for you, we get it that you're fine and you're fit and you're young, whatever, but we need it to be able to create what we call sterilizing immunity, or take its sterilizing immunity to the level of herd immunity from the individual level to make it something very good in terms of reducing transmission, then you do it. And that's what we're recommending. That's all. Otherwise, I'm not saying that everyone should take the vaccine. It doesn't have any problems. There are no ethical concerns. Of course there are. There's always issues that are behind the scenes that some companies might want to hide. But in fairness, I don't think any of these boys have tried to hide anything.
So let me ask you this. What's all of this about the companies getting some kind of assurance that they won't be sued? You must have seen this go around as well.
That's standard.
If something goes wrong,
that's standard in a concern, and it's a standard in practice, and it's been in place since 1986 or 88 or whatever, in the National Vaccine Compensation Program, or I think in the UK we call it the National the Vaccine Injury Payment, and that is simply the government. Someone sent me a clip the other day and said that a person said there's haram. Our biggest problem is people saying silly things, like silly things. Wallahi, one of the high profile people sent me, I need you to speak to this person really and sort him out because it's causing fitna. And I said, why? What's it causing fitna about? He's saying that, and he sent me a clip. In the clip, the guy was saying, you are non-Muslims, you are kuffar, you are non... He was making takfir on the basis of them wanting to take the vaccine. There were people... He was outside a COVID clinic, where people, 70, 80, 90-year-old people were getting vaccines. And he's saying, you're kuffar, you are not Muslims. You are not Muslims. So you have that, and then I see another one of a scholar who's sitting there who's saying it's completely haram for the vaccine company to be indemnified. It's completely haram for the vaccine company to be indemnified. Habibi, he had Sheikh in front of his name. I said, what fiqh is this? What do you mean it's haram to be indemnified? It wasn't them refusing to pay it. The government is paying for them. Habibi, and do you understand fiqh or not? So, he thought that, it's the idea. Obviously, he can't even be a beginner in fiqh, let alone he understood that if a person sells you something and says, by the way, if this kills you, or it's rubbish, or it's no good of use, it doesn't work, well, it's tough. Like, I'm giving you something broken and you got to pay full price for it. This is the level of his mu'amalat. The vaccine payment scheme was set up because the governments themselves want to promote the use of vaccines. That's straightforward. They also know that there are risks of problems, and those risks are going to stop people taking them. So we have to protect these vaccine companies to be caught up in litigation all the time, and so they took the responsibility off them and allowed them to go ahead.
Is this normal for all vaccines, or is this COVID one specific?
1988 has been in play in this country. It's been I don't know how many thousand incidents. We've paid out over 80 million pounds. It's not something which is new, and it's not something which is small. So
if someone grows horns or something, then
if someone grows horns, okay, first of all, if they're a nice set of horns, then he should look at that and take some benefit from that. But on a serious point, if a person had a serious side effect that they believe was due to the vaccine, there is a system there to compensate those people. At the current rates that we have in terms of incidents, they're an incredibly rare event.
Yeah. Just a reminder, please do head over to donate.islam22.com to help fund our podcast.
I mean, if you think about it, 80 million pounds over 40 years. I mean, obviously 80 million is a lot of money, but we're talking 40 years of hundreds of millions of doses of vaccine.
Yeah.
Listen, you can't, I joke about, if you drink Diet Coke, don't ask what's in the vaccine, right? Let me tell you something. My mum absolutely is, in fact, every mum absolutely hates the fact that their kids, if I'm still a kid, of course I'm still a kid, drinks diet drinks and all the aspartame and all that kind of bakwas, yeah? Listen, I've accepted the risk. I know that's going to kill me at some point. That's the end of the story. It's the only thing that's allowing me to not drink the sugar-based ones. I'm not giving any health advice here, and the doctors and everybody and all the mums are now having a heart attack. They're saying, look, this Molvi and is destroying us. I am not promoting Diet Coke. I'm just saying
Pepsi
that
Max.
when it comes, only Diet Pepsi. The idea that we partake in all of the medicines that we consume, the food, the drink, the this, the that in our world today, every single thing has a risk of manifold risk of long-term effects, whether it's from pesticides, whether it's from genetic modifications, whether it's whatnot. And I think that's valid. And I think that we make that decision every single day. And that's why I don't have, listen, Salman and everybody who's listening, I have absolutely no problem with people who do not want to take the vaccine. As I said in the lecture, doctors and pharmacists who are medicine experts, okay, drug experts, they themselves are the ones who least go to doctors, least take medicines. It's just our nature, it's our reality. From the sunnah as well, it's not something which is recommended or massively, something which is good. We know from just a common sense point of view, I'm going from all the areas, so professional, from Islamic, from common sense, the less that you use of medications does strengthen the body. The more that you'll have available in emergencies, the less antibiotics you take, then when you really do get the infection, it will have a much more stronger impact upon you in your time of need. The less painkillers that you use, you'll have a higher pain threshold. You'll be able to take a lot more. And then when you take the painkiller, small levels will be able to knock you out, no problem at all. You won't need to go up the pain killing ladder and go to analgesics, go to opioids and go to crazy stuff. So common sense wise, we shouldn't be taking medicines unless we have to. So there's no way that I'm going to be saying everybody should go out there. And if you don't want to, then say that. But don't go and talk rubbish. Don't chat rubbish. Don't say that, yani, I'm gonna take the vaccine and I'm gonna be get a laptop stuck up my nose, or I'm gonna be able to be tracked everywhere that I walk. Nobody cares about tracking you. You're a nobody. Okay, you're an absolute nobody. Nobody cares where you go and what you do. Alhamdulillah that they vaccinated. They started vaccinations with a proper people. Yani the elderly, muhtaram, respected, aqil, common sense people. Yani, subhanallah, at least when these folks were slightly younger and they were concerned about vaccinations, and they were worried about actually, they had a real fear. Back in the day, yani, when you're using, methyl mercury, for example, as opposed to ethyl mercury that came later, now hardly it's used at all. Back in those original days, they used to be seriously worried about birth defects, about disabilities, when these preservatives and adjuvants and all these different kind of metals and poisons were in its infancy stage, and they were used. People were seriously concerned at that time about disabilities. Now people are worried about, like, as if they're going to take the vaccine and it's going to download Windows 95 in them. Do you know what I mean? They had a real concern. Now these millennials and God knows what. Anyway, I don't want to go attack my favorite group of people, but let
me pick you up on a few of those points.
When you see people just chatting rubbish, that's my point. If you don't want to take it, well, I'll shake your hand. I respect you for it, but don't lie. Don't chat rubbish. Don't put other people at danger. Don't spread nonsense. Just say, this is the sunnah. This is what I'm going to do. That's my decision. Well, barakallahu feek. Jazakallah khair.
Let me pick you up on one of those points, right? So I want to talk about the whole, informed consent kind of thing, and obviously talking about the fake news and the deeper problems of our epistemology when we're entertaining conspiracy theories, etc., etc. But you mentioned the sunnah, you mentioned what the madhahib say about taking medicine generally, and you're talking about medicine in terms of, I agree, painkillers, antibiotics especially, you shouldn't take them if you don't need them. You should try and increase your threshold and all the rest of it. But I think there's an important distinction between that kind of stuff and vaccines, no? Because when you're talking about vaccines, when you're talking about someone has a headache and they if they're increasing their tawakkul, they're doing ruqya on themselves and so forth, that's good. There's that element as well. We need to inculcate, we need to strengthen that. But it seems that for public health crises, shouldn't we be applying the fiqh of public safety rather than the fiqh of medicine in general? Because that's a personal thing.
It's a very, very good point. Jazakallah khair. It's a very good point that can we make an analogy from masail, from issues that in the books of fiqh are talking about personal choice versus now, as you said, where populations are being asked one way or the other to get involved. And although the government is not obligating it, indirectly they are, or they certainly will. There's no doubt that for them to protect the industries that they are wanted to support, they're going to put restrictions. There'll be some form of passports, etc., etc. So I agree that I don't think it's a completely different conversation, but it needs a separate conversation. It needs a separate discussion, and that discussion has been had. Now, my point is that there's a fair criticism to make, and then just hearsay. The fair criticism would be, for example, I don't have a risk myself. Do I have to be, do I have to go along with something to protect others? So, I see a lot of people talking about, a lot of people answering this by saying, well, don't you go Hajj, don't you go Umrah, you need to get the meningitis vaccine, and so that's not an argument. That's not a legal argument. The Saudis' decision to vaccinate, so therefore there's no problem, therefore you should vaccinate. That's only an unbar person would put that argument forward. The truth is,
let me cross that one out.
if a person has no risk and looks after themselves, should they take a meningitis vaccine to prevent the spread in an emergency amongst millions of people in that scenario? I.e., is it linked to personal freedom or maslaha? And the fuqaha are agreed that the reason that rulers are obeyed, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim, is the maslaha, the benefit of the community at large. That is why it is obligatory to obey the ruler if he gives a ruling that everybody is to be obeyed, or everybody is to be forced to be vaccinated to protect a vulnerable group or a certain group of people or a certain issue. This concept applies in I don't know how many different scenarios, like a curfew, for example, in a extraordinary incident or a terrorist attack, or a you go into let's say that I'm in a bank and there's another 100 people in the bank, and the bank robbers come in and they rob the bank, and the cops arrive, and then they blast open everybody, everyone's on the floor, and they've done that whole taking their clothes off and they're dressed as civilians. The cops are going to make every single person then lie on the floor, arrest every single person, young, old, black, white, pregnant, not, whatever. We're not assuming anything. The criminal could be hiding amongst anyone. They'll go and arrest them. They'll put them in a cell. They'll question them until they're absolutely sure that everybody is is not the suspects. Is that allowed or not? It's haram, of course it's haram to do that. That's a dhulm. Is it allowed in this scenario? Of course it is, because the maslaha is that the people need to be caught. So this is something which is many examples in fiqh that people are required to, if it will be required, I'm saying, I don't know if it will be, but if the need comes and there is no actual evidence that it is something which is definite harmful or causing death or causing a problem, especially with the safety profile. So there's not an Islamic problem here. There's not an Islamic problem. But here's where I want to say why there is a concern, that we do need to validate the concerns of some people against the concept of vaccinations and how they see them separately to medicines. One of the bad experiences that the Muslims have had with vaccines makes it a very legitimate concern. Like, for example, HPV, the virus, human papillomavirus virus, which is in most countries given to women or girls of pre-sexual age, around 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And it's obviously protecting against HPV, which primarily is transferred via sexual contact, but actually it can be transferred via blood, via razors, via pregnancy, via whatever. And obviously it has a complication, a significant complication, risk of genital warts, cancer, and the like. A community that is looking after and doing tarbiyah right, they don't even in their wildest dreams expect that their population of girls, young girls, are going to be involved in sexual contact with multiple partners, which is what this is what's about, or same-sex relationships and all that kind of nonsense, right? So it's completely acceptable for a country, let alone a culture or a community, for a country, a Muslim country, for example, to look at in shock and horror at a vaccine that's protecting against a condition that is non-existent in their community, or very, very low incidence, because most people do not expect the people to do that. And they see it, like even in the West, it's understood as something which promotes illicitness. It kind of, give this vaccine, that means now you're allowed now to go out and do your parties, go and have your fun, what you want to do with the different partners and whatever. And when it gets that kind of reputation, that it gives sexual freedom and protection for girls to now go and boys, both of them can have HPV, then you can see that the Muslim kind of response to a vaccine like this is that this is just trying to cause a problem, increase the sexual illicitness, blah, 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 blah. And that's valid. That's absolutely valid. I haven't involved, my kids have not been involved in that. I don't ever expect that to happen. Could it be, is it maybe responsible or irresponsible? That's my decision. I'm not going to go out there and make lies about it. I'm not going to say that the vaccine is this and is wrong, or the vaccine is full of poisons and it's going to kill your kid and it's going to make them grow horns and it's got microchips in there, whatever, whatnot. But I'm going to say, listen, I don't like what the consequences or what it's indicating. I don't like the idea about behind it.
There's a broader discourse that it fits into, broader politics, broader soft power, for example. You can argue, of course. Let me ask you this: what have the experts in your research, what have they said about the fact that a lot of people are arguing, I don't know if there's a basis to this, but this vaccine that we're currently going through in the UK, the Pfizer one, it doesn't actually stop you spreading it to others.
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing, actually, that these two from the initial studies meaning the mRNA ones, meaning Pfizer and the Moderna ones, seem to actually have, inshallah, quite promising results in what we call sterilizing immunity. Immunity is of different levels, right? Or maybe, I don't want to get too technical, let me put it a different way, that it could have a number of positive effects. The least positive effect is that if you get corona, you're not going to die of it. It reduces any major symptoms and makes sure you only get away with something minor. That's the worst case scenario of a successful vaccine. The best case scenario of a successful vaccine is that it completely protects you. It doesn't, you don't even feel anything, right, when you get it.
And your mates as well.
And it kills it, stops the transmission of it, doesn't allow you to spread it to anybody else, and that the immunity lasts for 20 years, for 30 years, for 50 years, right? That's the perfect vaccine. Do we have the perfect vaccine? Of course not. But then, is there any medicine which is perfect in that sense? You know, when we give medicines for blood pressure, for example, or a beta blocker, for example, we always have the decision to make that you've got one which has been in the market for 20, 30 years with 30 years of safety data, long-term stability, can see all of the side effects and play around with them. So, for example, we give medication. You see, people think that side effects is just something which is just linked to vaccines or some new concept. What if I tell you that humans, mankind, has been intentionally, actively working with side effects to create a response? What if I tell you that the Prophet ﷺ came across a person came to him and he had a stomach problem. And the Prophet ﷺ gave him honey. Now honey, right, it is good for constipation. It actually causes diarrhea, right? There is a theory, there are some scholars that said that the reason that the Prophet ﷺ gave honey was to actually increase the rate of diarrhea. It's a theory, meaning that nobody eats honey to have diarrhea. Nobody wants to take honey so they have a bad stomach. People take honey for their wounds, for their general health, for their throats, this, that, not because I want to go to the toilet, because it's pain. But if you have a stomach infection and you have a problem, the side effect is now actually what's helping us here. The problem part of the drug, of the shifa, of the asl itself, the negative side of part of it is actually now helping us here as well. So side effects are to be managed. So when we decide to give a certain beta blocker, for example, to a particular patient, and we see that the new one, which is side effect free, blah, 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 but costs like 100 times the amount, there'll be certain people in the country that will say, well, you know what? Let me know the side effects of the one which is 50p. And you tell them. They'll say, you know what? I'll handle those. Because if it's just a headache and just a this, just a that, am I able to take paracetamol at that quantity to be able to cover it? The doctor will say yes. And many people will take the 50p option over the £100 a pack option. By the way, aspirin is a classic example. Everybody knows aspirin thins the blood, and most people take it, to avoid heart attack or just after a heart attack. It costs like 1 pence for a packet. 1 pence for a packet. But it has a risk of bleeding. It increases the risk of bleeding. It increases the risk of ulceration. It has significant side effect problems. In certain people who have got ulcer histories, we can't give it to them. It's just too much risk of exacerbating stomach ulcers. So the alternative, which thins the blood and it doesn't cause a problem to the stomach, is sometimes 100, 1,000 times its price. In a certain country, people are going to make a decision that, you know what, I'm going to have a proper biryani meal first before I take my aspirin, so that I protect my stomach with all of that gunk in there. They will do these things. They'll get industrious because they've got enough history and understanding and no surprises from the side effect profile of a well-established drug. So my point is that when it comes to vaccines, that is always going to be a problem. It doesn't matter how long you wait. In some studies, in some of the earlier vaccines, 10 years later, we're still doing the follow-up studies and making sure that we can tweak things and so on. And these vaccines now, and this is important, Salman, and again, this has turned into another lecture, man. I thought you were going to be arguing more and being a normal, irritating Salman, but I don't know what was happened to you, bro. You lost your touch. The interesting thing about Moderna, all right, the one which has just been released, actually is fascinating. this is going to not just be studied for all of its follow-ups in its existing groups and all the people who are taking it, and not just at that level, but they're still not even sure whether they've got the optimum dose. Like, when they started the study at the beginning, they started off with 25 micrograms and 250 micrograms and 50 micrograms as a dose, and as there's two doses. Very, very quickly, because of the public pressure, government pressure, they saw the results with 100 microgram very early on, promising. They said, you know what, we're not going to waste time here. Let's pull the people and bam, all them into 100 micrograms. And they got these results currently off a 100 microgram dose. Now that the drug is out and it's being used, do you think they're going to sit there? No. They can now do the following. Number one, now start to experiment in various groups whether 250 is more efficacious, takes it to 99%. They're going to now start checking whether going down, for example, or going at 150 in a single dose, for example. They're going to now, that Sahin, the head, I was listening to him the other day about the one who found the BioNTech vaccine. His now focus, he's now got this out. That's just part one. Now his focus is to change the formulation so it doesn't have to be kept at minus 6,000 million degrees, right? He's now going to find one which is going to be able to be transported around at 2 degrees, 8 degrees, and it's not costing 50 quid, but costing 50p or something like that. That's what the next stage is, and they'll be checking bioavailability. There's the big study, for example. What if a person, you've heard this issue, I've had corona, I've got natural immunity now, so I don't need to take the vaccine. There is actual clear scientific data that shows that the level of immune response that you get even after having the infection is not as strong as the artificial one that's induced by a vaccine. So, so a new study that Moderna are going to do, and they've already started, is what if we only give one dose to a person who's had the infection, and that booster dose is boosting the natural immunity response, therefore they won't need two doses, and that would then help in the number of doses, bring the cost down, help sterilizing, help herd immunity. So listen, these studies would need to go on, variations of them on, again. There's nobody trying to hide this information. Nobody's trying to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. Could we have done more? Yes. Should we have done more before we released it? In my personal opinion, no. In my professional opinion, no. In the professional opinion and the scientists and experts of the world's leading virologists and immunologists, answer is no, which is why they recommended it. And there is no reason for us. You can have all the conspiracy theories in the world for us to think that they're all one part of some massive cabal, that are holding the world to ransom. And I don't know what kind of conspiracy ideas that, mashallah, you guys talk about Islam 21C every week.
We do not engage in conspiracy theories in Islam 21C.
You are a conspiracy theory. You're right.
I'm a conspiracy theory. I take that as a compliment. Let me ask you this, okay? This is a question that some people have asked, or a claim rather, right? So in terms of the reduction of mortality over the last few decades with the proliferation of vaccines and so on and so forth, they say, wait a second, what if it's just
natural,
caused by something else?
Is this not true?
That the vaccines are useless. The real reduction of mortality rates around the world are because of decades of the general improvement of hygiene and control of hygiene, better hygiene, lower deaths, etc., not these vaccines that make big pharma loads of money.
Lower levels of this and higher levels of hygiene didn't help the world right now, did it? Right? We're in the worst crisis we've ever seen. It didn't help the world right now. So first of all, that's rubbish. Secondly, that idea that smallpox died out and measles died out and all the rest of it died out not because of the vaccine, that's completely acceptable as a theory. No point you putting that theory forward once we get a vaccine out, vaccinate everybody, and then you say, oh, actually, it wasn't because of the vaccine. But it was because of X, Y, Z. If you had put the theory out before the vaccine was used, I take it. We're people of science. We take the stats. It's just nonsense. This is my point. And if you're going to argue against it, argue with the real problems. Argue and say, I don't trust Pfizer. You know what? I don't trust Pfizer as well. If Pfizer was doing this in-house...
But you trust Shaheen, though, innit?
No, but listen, seriously. If Pfizer was doing this in-house, the amount of stuff that they've done... Bro, they come try and buy me out. I remember 20 years ago in the pharmacy at the low level. Speak to doctor, do this, make sure they give our drug, this, that way. It's a complete corruption. In our Sharia, we also know that
business.
taking the gifts in this scenario is something which is impermissible, let alone at the professional level. They are up to the most dodgy practices, right? But just because some people are doing haram or corruption or dodgy practices or whatever, whatnot, does not mean that they don't speak the truth or don't do good or don't get it right or don't bring benefit. That's just nonsense.
Yeah.
That's not common sense. It's not professional. It's not Islamic. Where does this idea come from? The independent experts, the independent panels, advisory panels, the regulatory bodies, those are the people that we're putting our trust in. Those are the folks that we are hoping that are going to get the job done. And based upon the facts, not just their statements, we look at the data ourselves. We see the strong points. We see the weak points. Those panels themselves are holding these companies to account. If they pass it and are happy with it, it doesn't always mean there's a massive conspiracy, that they're all in bed together. That this negative thinking, this suspicious thinking, this paranoia is so unbecoming of the Muslims. We are the people who are least concerned about what happens. Because remember, in Islam, different to Christianity and different, and this is where it comes from. It's not from Islam, it's from our wider religions that we've had exposure to. For them, it's always about other people. That's why Christianity is all about Isa alayhi salam dying for the world's sins. It's everybody else got to deal with it. Personal agency, individual agency is not a real thing. Whereas in Islam, we recognize وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى, that there is no person that carries the sole burden of anybody else. You are responsible for yourself. And so when we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge us for the way we think, the way we act, the way that we do, that nobody can force you into this, you can't use excuse that he said this, she said that. No, you have been given agency, you have been given aql, you are responsible. So for the Muslims to always think that that's going to happen to me, they're going to monitor me, so what? Even if it was true, so what?
You won't be held accountable for that.
It's crazy how weak we've been made, weak up here, that we're so scared of absolutely everything. SubhanAllah.
We were talking about this in the car last night with Mahmoud as well. It's really important that we have to kind of cut off the rabbit hole that people go down, because at the end of it is a rejection of Islam itself. Because if you're rejecting things like the trusted testimony of experts, if you're rejecting things like mass transmission, you mentioned hundreds if not thousands of scientists and experts, all kind of pushing the same, largely the same kind of narrative, largely the same, doing the same peer-reviewed studies and so on and so forth, and to such a degree that it's irrational to think that they all, throughout so many countries and throughout this time, they all gathered upon the same lie, or they all happened to make the same mistake. And this if it sounds familiar, obviously this is tawatur. Right? This is how we know. This is how we know the thawabit of Islam, the main kind of core issues about Islam, the sources of Islam, for example.
MashaAllah. Mahmoud got that deep, he got that, to that level?
Not Mahmoud, obviously I had to help him out a bit, innit? But
Hadouken!
So, I mean, that's the thing. If I don't mean to be rude to anyone watching who's kind of
No, but it's so
dabbled
true.
in
Wallahi, I
these
just
things,
want to
but
say, Salman, I just need to emphasize that point. It is so true. What have we become when you become that paranoid? When you become so intellectually weak? It's just insane. This is not acceptable.
it's like an
at any level,
extremes,
let alone Muslim.
unwarranted skepticism.
Jazakallah khair. Listen, when I gave my lecture, I started off with this point. I said that the reason that I've actually done this is because this what is descended into is not becoming of the title Muslim. Like, we expect this crackpot nonsense, from some people who are in a bunker in a southern state of Texas or in Houston or whatever, right? And with their guns and them.
Houston is where NASA is, isn't it?
Yeah, wherever it is. Okay, some, I don't know.
Sheikh
Nowadays
Yasir
you don't know
Qadhi
what's
as well is
politically
there,
correct or not,
apparently.
and I don't know what the phrase is, if you can say redneck or not, whatever. They're saying there, they've got their guns, everyone's up against them, they've got their old wind-up radio, and they're there, expecting the attack to occur. That's the people, the misfits of society who don't belong and whatnot, the kind of rubbish that they regurgitate. The Muslim, if they are starting to give so much power to the powerless, to the shaitan, who has incredible permission and game and tricks and moves, and yet we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not allow him to overcome us, that we are still ultimately responsible. And that's someone who's got genuine control, power, this, that, and so on. Yani for us to be so scared of the state or big pharma or this or that, to the level that it makes us reject absolute facts. It makes us reject the day, it makes us reject the night. It's only your iman, your adab is gone. So you see the way that they speak, like this, like the videos you're seeing of the people. What has not wanting to take the vaccine or taking the vaccine got to do with you are not a Muslim? You are not a Muslim. A'udhu billah. A'udhu billah. To what level have you gone? When people are making these kind of statements, their aqidah has become so weak. The problem is that I don't want to just turn this into a bashing session of people who don't want to take the vaccine. Because like I said, I don't have a problem people don't want to take the vaccine. It's the anti-vax movement. It's the extreme statements. It's the lies. It's the
problem. The problem is things that make sense. Yeah, that's our human weakness, that we get drawn into not things that are, because there's a difference between things that make sense and things that are true. Yeah. Obviously, true will make sense, but even completely batil, ridiculous, demonstrably false things, they can make sense to people, right? Because it's a personal, it's filtering through your own cognitive faculties, and we've seen neuroscientists, we've seen cognitive scientists, psychologists. They've studied this in depth. The Muslim theologians, they studied in depth in talking about tazkiyatun nafs and all that kind of good stuff, about how something wrong can actually make sense and be وَزَيَّنَ لَهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. So many times that shaitan beautified, you don't even need shaitan sometimes, that something false can make sense if you build up a broader narrative about it. And if that's the first thing that someone hears about a subject, then you have that anchoring bias as well. You're looking at the new opinion through the lens of your previously held one. And if that previously held one was the world is flat, or lizards control the world, or there's no such thing as COVID, or whatever, then you're going to naturally have some resistance to accepting that, aren't you?
Absolutely. And listen, I know that a lot of people get offended. They say that, how dare you treat us like that, and we're not old bandus and all the rest of it. I'm not talking about everybody. Certainly, if you're going around in the street saying that, you're going to grow horns, and Michael, what's his name? What's that fish called? The Microsoft guy. What's his name called?
Bill Gates.
Bill Gates controls my mom and dad and my whatever. And, all this kind of nonsense. Then you are the bandu of all bandus. Honestly, you don't belong in you're besmirching the name of villages and villages, right? The issue is that if you have genuine concerns, then you should speak to an expert and not go onto the internet and just find the expert that you want, or a scholar that is validating what you want. And you're falling into the same trap of the worst of the sects that have come in our Islamic history, and also world history, just human history, when people are always looking for validation of their own ideas. And as you just said, shaitan is always available to do that for falsehood. But we shouldn't allow ourselves, in an age of knowledge and science and technology, to fall into that trap. I understand that there are certain things which are difficult to get a handle on, like poisons, like aluminium. How can I be injecting aluminium into my body? How can I be injecting mercury into my body? How can I have poisons as ingredients of a vaccine? Sometimes you just have to stay in your lane. You have to just realize that, you don't want to ask too many questions, because you can't handle the truth, right? You just can't. If you start to find out too many things, it will cause crisis. Now, we have that in Islam, that you speak to people according to their level. You don't want to give everybody all the full knowledge. And if I was to tell you that we're using poison to cure people all the time, arsenic, for example, it causes cancer, it kills people. That's used in certain types of leukemia as a medicine. Digoxin kills people. Habibi, we use digoxin every day. I must have dispensed maybe tons upon tons of digoxin to control heart rhythm, to control the heart. This is something which, radiation, for example, and so many other examples. So, it's a shocking concept to people. Poisons. You use poisons. Sharia allows the use of poisons. It's a mass ijma' of the fuqaha that something which is a poison in its maximum amount but it's pure and not been prohibited in principle, in its minor amount can be used. So the Sharia has already dealt with that in principle. Medicine deals with that in principle, but because you can't get your head around the idea that poison in your head is only cyanide, right? Because you're in one track mind from what you've seen in the movies. Now you're going to tell us what it's haram, it's kufr to give.
Even cyanide has it's in apple cores and stuff. Yeah, Allah created these things for
like I said,
wisdom.
Don't ask too much. The thing that I've been repeating in the last couple of sessions I've done in this in public is the authority one. People saying that how dare comparing the different countries of the world and different regions in the way that they're approaching this, right? So looking at the West and the curtailing of freedoms, I don't want to be, I have the right, blah, blah. Listen, this nonsense of your right, this is purely a Western construct. This idea, don't ask and go into areas that you don't want to go into, right? Because if you realize what would happen if there was an Islamic authority and they saw that the interests of the elderly, al-muhtaram, ahlul barakah, needs to be protected because they're vulnerable and we need them here because they're the only ones making istighfar for us, only ones who are praying at night for us, they're the ones who are keeping us down. And all you plums who are out there doing absolutely nothing, squat for the ummah, who don't care about the ummah, don't care about the health, and happy to get them all infected and all them die. And it passed a fatwa, and it passed a ruling, not a fatwa, a ruling, that it needed to be taken by every single person. And you said, my rights, this stuff, you be slapped silly with that. You're right. Right. Are you? And that's why I said, don't go to places you don't want to go to. Don't just say, I don't want to take the vaccine, and just shut your mouth. You're in a country that gives you free choice, that's allowing you to do what you want. You want to be arrogant, selfish little self, then no problem. No problem at all. And I'm not saying everybody doesn't take the vaccine, and it is that, but I'm saying if you are a troublemaker and talk rubbish and all lie, whatever, then just stop that lying and just say, thankfully I don't need to take it. But believe me, if you came up with this rubbish, in the presence of scholars or the presence of an Islamic authority, bro, your tongue wouldn't be able to finish the sentence.
So maybe that's a good place to kind of take some lessons in terms of, some people they're habitually kind of going down these kind of conspiracy theory routes, and there's a bit of the magnification of the self as well. There's that lure that I have some information, I have the truth, and other people don't know about it. Other people are dumb and thick and the rest of it, and it's kind of a disease of the heart, isn't it? And that affects your thinking.
I'm not worried about their hearts. I'm worried about my own hearts. Wallahi, I've not been this depressed for a long time. I don't do public lectures and things. I can't remember the last time I did a lecture on public streaming. In fact, 5 years, 10 years. I can't remember when. Or done a specific podcast or whatever. I'm doing it because genuinely depressed. I'm worried about myself. And it's me. And every time I do it, I get worse and worse. That arrogance that you're talking about, and everyone else is dumb, is getting into my heart. And I'm really worried for myself. I'm like thinking to myself now that when people, like I said, those who study the fiqh of death with me, I go into a lot of detail in this issue of medicines, the wider, not vaccines, but the wider concept. And so they know that I'm not a massive medicines fan. And I think that people should be not taking medicines anywhere close to the way that they do. And that there's a major aqidah problem. And tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is suffering so badly. And people don't understand the concept. And I wrote something on Facebook about that recently as well, about how people need to understand that shifa, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that the maw'idah min rabbikum wa shifa, that the maw'idah comes from you, the lesson comes to you to humble you, to make you connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first. The shifa comes second. Now everybody's straight to the shifa. And not even the shifa of Allah, like ya shafi, yashfini ya Rab. No, it's the shifa of the doctor. I've got to get to the medicine. Tawakkul on Allah, reliance on Allah, belief in Allah has suffered. So I'm a massive fan actually of anti-medicine. But now when you see people chatting so much rubbish, lying, and really affecting the honest and important efforts of people who are trying to control the biggest health emergency ever in our history, and they are subverting that, I now can only see them with contempt. And you should not look at people with contempt, because it breeds arrogance and pride in the heart. Pride. But arrogance, I can see statements coming across arrogant. People must be looking at this thing, look at him shouting, spitting, this, that, whatever, whatnot. And who are you to be doing that? And it's scary to me. I can see myself. It's like I'm detached looking at myself saying, bro, what are you doing? Just shut up and calm down. but I can't. It's driving me nuts, this thing is. I cannot understand. If you don't want it, just don't want it, but don't talk rubbish. Don't talk rubbish when your experts and the leaders and the people. It's a real problem. It's a real problem. And this is one of the reasons why, you know, I try to minimize these kind of public because it only shows me up. Everybody looking.
I was suggesting for those people who are inclined to conspiracies that you have to hit them back with better conspiracies.
That's what I tell myself, isn't it? But it's not. When you play it back and you hear yourself screaming, shouting like a madman. Yeah. But anyway.
Oh, well, you spoke. Was I supposed to say no? Really, you know, you should come back. Please don't go anywhere. Anyway, like I said, this is actually a conspiracy. All of these conspiracies, are in fact a conspiracy, because the COVID vaccine was made by some Muslims, and there's a bit of Sharia in there, and if you take it, you know, Islam will spread. Why don't we just spread this kind of
and you
thing
thought
instead?
That the only thing that the Turk gave us was Urturul.
Yeah,
that's what you thought.
You said something about Ottomans as well, that they were involved in the making the early vaccines.
I haven't said hardly anything that I wanted to say in this thingy. All right, that's the irony. Just rant.
Yeah.
Just I don't know what
I think you're giving Sheikh Kamal al-Makki a run for his money as the amazing rant man.
Interesting stuff. Yani, the Muslims got so much game in this. The ideas, the theories, the origins, and the Uthmani Empire was at the forefront of the development of the concept of inoculation, of a variolation, which is the forefather of actual vaccination.
So there's smallpox and cowpox and stuff.
The lecture for that.
Yeah.
I don't want to bore people again.
Excellent. I'm conscious of time, Sheikh. I'd spend more time doing this, but I think we're running out of memory card space. So let's call it a night there, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan for joining us. Very grateful. I think now all those shares in Pfizer and AstraZeneca that you have, inshallah, you're going to get a good return from them. Yeah.
You want to hear something interesting?
Go on.
Obviously, I do a lot of investing and I do a lot of thingy. Number one, I didn't have shares in Pfizer, which I'm gutted about. Like, as in,
their share prices remain quite steady.
No. That's now, meaning that if I had used my brain, when this thing come on the scene, I would have immediately gone into those that have got a track record in vaccinations. Muggins here instead held on to his original holding, because I've had AstraZeneca for donkey's years, right? Because obviously it's medications. I
thought you said you held on to your shares in BHS or something.
AstraZeneca doesn't have much game in the vaccine market.
Yeah.
So Muggins, this mug here, held big in AstraZeneca, which has tanked, right? And you know what it is? I don't even want them to do good. Here's the irony: that even for my own shareholding to increase, they've been so rubbish in so many things. Like, you know, going to the media, trying to release the results to the media instead of the scientific community, trying to play, that we're doing it for no profit, but what's wrong with profit? What's wrong with profit? Right?
Sallallahu alayhi wasallam.
Coming across anyway, so that's the joke in it. That I'm losing out with this and whatever happens.
Could be worse. I thought you were going to say you had some, you're still holding on to your Blockbuster, Woolworths and BHS shares.
Don't be hating on Blockbuster, bro. You know what the Blockbuster will say.
I tucked on raw nerve there. I think you had some. Anyway, I was going to say, for those watching at home, this is not medical advice. Don't replace this for medical advice. Looks like I'm going to have to say this is not financial advice either. So don't complain to us when you lose all your money.
Go see your doctor. Go see your doctor and make his day worse.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. I think, thank you for coming on and cheering us all up. May Allah reward you. And
may Allah continue to give you all tawfiq to do the good work that you do, to cover up for the rubbish that you sent out. But every one or two good programs cover for the 10 rubbish ones.
Yeah.
So,
even a broke clock is right twice a day, innit? Jazakallah khair, Sheikh. And Jazakallah khairan to you at home watching. Again, if you like this podcast, give it a like and a share. If you didn't like it, then press the thumbs down button twice, okay? Let us know in the comments your thoughts, your feedback, any arguments you have in the comments below. And just remember, please do subscribe, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so you're at the front of the queue whenever we upload anything new. We notice again that a lot of people are watching, but a significant percentage of them aren't subscribed. Also, finally, please do consider donating. Head over to donate.islamtwenty.com and please try and donate £5 a month to help the Unscripted podcast and other Islam 20 activities keep on going. That's it from me, from myself and the Islam 20 team. Until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.